6 months after the awards ceremony, Sarah's office at Transparently Yours hummed with purposeful energy. The exposed brick walls now displayed framed headlines. Marketing industry faces ethics overhaul. SEC launches investigation into corporate espionage ring. New whistleblower protection laws proposed. But Sarah's favorite was the smallest frame on her desk, a handwritten note from a junior marketer thanking her for saving her career from a similar scandal. When Rachel and James's lawyers reached out with settlement offers and carefully worded apologies, Sarah's new assistant, a former victim of corporate theft herself, returned the letters unopened. Not out of bitterness, but because Sarah was in the middle of teaching an ethics seminar to Fortune 500 executives. The greatest campaigns, she told her audience, aren't about destroying competition, they're about elevating standards. Her series of industry-shaking articles had transformed her from a scandal survivor into a respected voice for reform. Companies now hired Transparently Yours not just for marketing, but for ethical oversight and corporate culture rebuilding. The old friend group tried reaching out too, full of explanations about how Rachel had manipulated them. Sarah met them for coffee once, listened to their apologies, and realized something profound. She'd outgrown the need for their validation. Her new circle included pioneers, reformers, and survivors who understood that trust had to be earned, not assumed. Her agency became known as a sanctuary for talented professionals who'd faced betrayal. The mentorship program she started had a waiting list of executives eager to learn how to build success on integrity rather than exploitation. Former competitors became allies in her mission to reform industry practices. One rainy evening, Diana visited her office. "Remember when you thought your career was over?" she asked, admiring the wall of achievements. "Now you're teaching at Yale's business school next semester." Sarah smiled, remembering the broken woman who once Googled her betrayers at 3 a.m. That version of herself hadn't died. She'd evolved into someone stronger, wiser, more compassionate. The betrayal that was meant to destroy her had instead revealed her true purpose. The last time she saw Rachel was through her office window, a glimpse of a familiar figure hurrying through the rain, heading to another court appearance. Sarah felt no satisfaction in her downfall, no joy in the justice being served. Instead, she felt gratitude for the harsh lessons that had led her here. Her phone buzzed with a message from her publisher. "Your book, Phoenix Rising, Transforming Betrayal into Professional Revolution," just hit the bestseller list. Below it was a text from her partner, a cybersecurity expert she'd met during her investigation. "Dinner at 8? Have news to share." Sarah stood at her office window, just as she had that day at Sterling and Hayes, when everything seemed perfect. But this view was different. It showed a city where corporate culture was slowly changing, where ethical business wasn't just a buzzword, but a movement she'd helped create. The perfect life she'd lost had been replaced by something far more valuable, a life of purpose, built not on appearances, but on unwavering integrity. In the end, her greatest victory wasn't exposing the betrayal. It was becoming someone who could transform it into positive change. Sarah Chen's Louboutin heels clicked against the polished marble floors of Sterling and Hayes Marketing's 20th floor office. The golden hour sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across her corner office where a bottle of Dom Perignon waited on her desk, a gift from her latest satisfied client. At 32, she was the youngest executive account director in the firm's history, and today marked her 5th consecutive successful campaign launch. The Velocity Sports campaign had been particularly challenging. The brand was hemorrhaging market share when they approached Sterling and Hayes, their reputation in tatters after a series of PR disasters. Sarah had orchestrated a complete turnaround in just 4 months, rebranding them from a basic athletic wear company into a luxury lifestyle movement. The campaign had exceeded projections by 147%, and industry whispers suggested it would sweep this year's Marketing Excellence Awards. To the woman who turns everything she touches into gold, James's voice carried from her office doorway. Her fiancé stood there, designer suit perfectly tailored to his athletic frame, holding a bouquet of white peonies, of favorites. His presence at her office was unexpected, but not unusual. As an investment banker in the same building, He often surprised her with impromptu celebrations. Behind him, Rachel appeared with a knowing smile, her Hermes scarf artfully draped over a black sheath dress. "I told him about the velocity numbers," she said, stepping into the office. "This calls for a proper celebration." Sarah's heart swelled as she looked at them, the two most important people in her life. She'd met Rachel during freshman orientation at Yale, two ambitious girls from different worlds who clicked instantly. Through breakups, family dramas, and career struggles, Rachel had been her constant. And it was Rachel who'd introduced her to James 3 years ago at a charity gala. "The restaurant is booked for 8, James said, placing the flowers in a crystal vase. "Everyone's coming, the whole gang from college, plus your team. I know how much you hate big fusses, but this is special." Sarah glanced at her desk calendar, where a pink post-it marked "Wedding Venue Tour" Saturday peeked out. In 6 months, she and James would exchange vows in the same botanical garden where he proposed. Rachel, as maid of honor, had already started planning an epic bachelorette weekend in Bali. First, a toast, Rachel declared, expertly popping the champagne cork, to Sarah Chen, the marketing maverick of Boston. "The woman who has it all, brains, beauty, and the biggest heart I know." The champagne fizzed in crystal flutes as the setting sun painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. Sarah's gaze drifted to the framed photo on her desk, herself, James, and Rachel at last summer's vineyard retreat, all bright smiles and sunlit happiness. In that moment, life felt almost suspiciously perfect, like a masterfully edited advertisement where every element was precisely placed for maximum impact. If only she'd recognized that sometimes, the most convincing campaigns hide the deepest deceptions. The first sign appeared during a routine client meeting with Luxe Cosmetics. Sarah was midway through presenting their holiday campaign when Gloria Chen, the CEO, slid a familiar-looking document across the conference table. "Care to explain this?" she asked, her perfectly manicured nail tapping against the paper. Sarah's blood ran cold. It was her confidential strategy blueprint for Luxe's upcoming skincare line launch, except it wasn't. The document bore striking similarities to her work, but key elements had been twisted, repurposed for their biggest competitor, Radiance Beauty. The typography, the market analysis framework, even the unique demographic targeting approach she'd developed, all there, just slightly modified. "I trusted you, Sarah," Gloria said, disappointment evident in her voice. "We've worked together for 3 years. How did our strategy end up in our competitors' hands?" Back in her office, Sarah's hands trembled as she reviewed every file access log, every email thread. The leak had to have come from somewhere, but her team's security protocols were ironclad. As she scrolled through her sent items, a pattern emerged, subtle formatting changes in documents she distinctly remembered perfecting, slight alterations in presentation decks she'd personally finalized. That evening, James was late again. "Client dinner," his text read, followed by a string of apologetic emojis. Sarah tried calling Rachel for their usual Wednesday wine night debrief, but it went straight to voicemail. Opening Instagram, she noticed Rachel's latest story, a check-in at Malo, the new high-end restaurant downtown, the same place James had mentioned his client dinner was supposed to be. She closed the app, telling herself she was being paranoid, but the coincidences kept piling up. During a team brainstorming session, her junior associate mentioned seeing their newest campaign concept in a rival agency's pitch deck at an industry networking event. Competitors seemed to know details about Sterling and Hayes' upcoming pitches that hadn't left her office. The weekly friend group dinner became an exercise in careful observation. Rachel's phone buzzed constantly, and she'd excuse herself to take calls, returning with slightly smudged lipstick and flushed cheeks. James's jokes felt forced, his hand on Sarah's waist more performative than affectionate. Their friends exchanged quick glances when they thought she wasn't looking, conversations stuttering whenever she joined them. One night, Sarah stayed late at the office, methodically checking her files. A notification popped up. Someone was accessing her presentation folders using her credentials, but she was the only one in the building. The system showed the login coming from James's firm 3 floors down. She reached for her phone to call him, then stopped. According to his earlier text, he was supposed to be at a business dinner in Cambridge. The perfect life she'd built was developing hairline fractures, spreading like cracks in a mirror. Each morning revealed new inconsistencies, fresh betrayals lurking beneath the surface of her carefully curated world. Sarah had built her career on reading between the lines, on spotting patterns others missed. Now those same skills were showing her things she wasn't sure she was ready to see. The Marketing Excellence Awards ceremony glittered with Boston's elite at the Four Seasons Ballroom. Sarah sat at a back table, wearing the same shade of red lipstick from the day she discovered those emails. Her table card read, "Transparently yours, nominee for innovation in ethical marketing." Rachel's latest text to James flashed across Sarah's secured phone. "Front row seats. Can't wait to see her face when they announce my win." Rachel looked radiant accepting her PR Professional of the Year award, her white designer dress catching the spotlight. James sat in the front row, beaming with practiced adoration. Sarah noted how Rachel's speech hit all the right notes: integrity, innovation, mentorship. "Marketing isn't just about selling products," Rachel declared, clutching her crystal trophy. "It's about trust, about building relationships that last." Sarah pressed a button on her phone. Right on cue, every screen in the venue flickered. The professional live stream cut to a different feed, one Sarah had spent months preparing. Email threads appeared first, showing Rachel selling confidential information to competitors. Then came bank statements, offshore accounts, suspicious transfers, James's careful money laundering of their illegal gains. Security footage showed their late-night office meetings, Rachel photographing confidential documents. Calendar entries revealed their systematic targeting of vulnerable companies. But Sarah's masterstroke wasn't just exposing their affair or their corporate espionage. Her investigation had uncovered something bigger, a network of corruption that spread through Boston's top firms. Rachel and James weren't just betraying her. They were part of an elaborate scheme that had compromised dozens of companies. The evidence was damning and meticulous. Each document was time-stamped, every transaction tracked, all communications verified by digital forensics experts. Sarah had learned from their mistakes. No detail was left to chance. No evidence could be dismissed as circumstantial. Rachel's face, projected on the giant screens, cycled through emotions: confusion, shock, terror. She grabbed for her phone, but it was too late. The industry's biggest names watched as their own complicity was exposed. CEOs shifted uncomfortably as their companies' names appeared in transaction logs. "Security breach," someone shouted, but the hotel's tech team couldn't stop the presentation. Sarah had ensured that. She'd hired the best AT security firms months ago. James tried to reach the podium, perhaps to damage control, but stopped short when his own internal memos appeared on screen. Detailed plans to manipulate stock prices using stolen marketing intelligence. The final slide was simple: a QR code linking to a secure website where whistleblowers could safely report corporate espionage. Below it, a single line: "Truth isn't just about exposure, it's about change." Sarah stood quietly and walked out as chaos erupted behind her. In her purse, a sealed envelope contained copies of everything, ready for the SEC and FBI. Her phone buzzed with notifications. Journalists, lawyers, corporate boards, all demanding answers. But Sarah wasn't interested in giving statements. She had done what marketing did best. She had revealed a truth people needed to see, and now that truth would do the rest of the work for her. At 3:47 a.m. on a Sunday morning, Sarah sat cross-legged on her apartment floor, surrounded by empty wine bottles and her laptop's harsh glow. Her browser history told a pathetic story. Rachel Martinez PR success, James Thompson Morton Stanley promotion, how to rebuild reputation after mental breakdown. Her fingers trembled as she typed their names again, hunting for any scrap of information about their life together, the life that should have been hers. The screen blurred. She reached for the last bottle, but her elbow knocked over a stack of moving boxes she still hadn't unpacked. As they toppled, something leather-bound slid out: her old Yale journal, its pages stuffed with Post-its and newspaper clippings. Flipping it open, She found her younger self's handwriting, bold and confident. Marketing isn't about selling products. It's about understanding human nature, people's desires, their fears, their weaknesses. That's where the real story lives. Her phone buzzed, a LinkedIn notification. Dr. Diana Wang is leading a workshop. Digital Ethics in Modern Marketing. Understanding Corporate Espionage. Diana had been her favorite professor, the one who taught her to look beyond surface metrics to find the human story beneath. Something clicked. Sarah grabbed a fresh notebook and began writing, not stopping until dawn painted her walls pink. She'd been analyzing her downfall all wrong. She wasn't just a victim of betrayal. She was witnessing a masterclass in manipulation. Rachel and James hadn't just stabbed her in the back. They'd executed a sophisticated corporate espionage operation. She opened her laptop again, but this time wasn't searching their names. Instead, she pulled up cases of corporate whistleblowers, studied patterns of intellectual property theft, analyzed how digital forensics tracked information leaks. Her marketing brain kicked in, seeing patterns, connecting dots. At 7 a.m., she walked to her local coffee shop, ordering her usual vanilla latte. As she waited, a familiar voice called out, "Sarah Chen?" Diana Wang stood there, elegant as ever in her signature red glasses. "I wondered if I'd see you after you viewed my profile. Heard about what happened at Sterling and Hayes." Sarah braced for pity, but Diana's eyes held something else. Calculation. "You know," Diana said, stirring her green tea, "every great campaign tells a story. But the best ones, they reveal a truth people didn't even know they needed to hear." They talked for 3 hours. About digital fingerprints, about paper trails, about how the best way to expose corruption wasn't through scandal, but through systematic revelation of truth. Back in her apartment, Sarah looked at her reflection, really looked, for the first time in months. The dark circles under her eyes weren't signs of defeat anymore. They were battle scars. She opened her laptop, creating a new folder titled Project Phoenix. Rachel and James had taught her the art of betrayal. Now she would use that knowledge to become something they never expected. Their worst nightmare, wearing Louboutin heels. Sarah's unraveling began in public, at Sterling and Hayes' annual black and white gala. She stood in a black Valentino dress she'd bought for her engagement photos, watching Rachel work the room in white. The champagne in her system turned bitter as Rachel stepped up to the podium to accept an Industry Achievement Award. "I believe in integrity above all," Rachel's voice carried across the ballroom. "In this industry, trust is everything." Something inside Sarah snapped. She moved through the crowd like a ghost, emerging beside Rachel at the podium. "Tell them about trust," she said, her voice eerily calm. "Tell them how you and James accessed my files. How you sold my work to competitors. How you—" Her voice broke as security guards approached. Rachel's performance was masterful. "Oh, Sarah," she said, voice dripping with concern. "I was worried this might happen. Everyone, Sarah's been under tremendous stress lately. James told me she's been having episodes." The next day, screenshots circulated through their friend group, carefully selected text messages showing Sarah's deteriorating mental state. James had been documenting everything, building a case. Texts where she asked about his late nights were labeled as possessive behavior. Questions about missed calls became paranoid tendencies. Her corner office was reassigned by Wednesday. "We think you need something quieter," her boss said, avoiding eye contact. "The junior accounts will be less pressure." Her new workspace was a cubicle near the bathroom, where she could hear every flush, every whispered conversation about her public breakdown. The friends she'd had since college stopped answering her calls. At their favorite wine bar, she overheard the bartender telling someone she was banned for erratic behavior. Another story James had planted. Her wedding vendors started calling about cancellations, but the deposits were non-refundable. She later learned Rachel had rebooked them all for her own ceremony. Sarah's new apartment was a studio in Somerville, all she could afford after the career nosedive and lost deposits. The walls were so thin, she could hear her neighbor's TV through them, some Spanish soap opera that became the soundtrack to her sleepless nights. She started ordering groceries online after having a panic attack in Whole Foods, triggered by seeing Rachel's face on a magazine cover. Hihia's rising star talks about mentoring women in business. Her clothes stopped fitting, hanging loose on her frame. Dark circles appeared under her eyes, deep enough that even heavy concealer couldn't hide them. She caught her reflection in the subway window one morning and didn't recognize herself. The polished executive was gone, replaced by someone hollow-eyed and haunted. The final blow came when she discovered James had been paying for couples therapy, not for them, but for himself and Rachel. He used their joint account, the sessions overlapping with dates he claimed to be at business dinners. The therapist's notes, accidentally sent to their shared email, talked about helping them navigate the guilt of their relationship's origins. In her tiny apartment, Sarah sat on a second-hand IKEA couch, surrounded by wedding magazines she couldn't bring herself to throw away, listening to the endless loop of Spanish dramatic revelations through the wall. Rock bottom, she discovered, wasn't a moment. It was a place you lived in until you forgot there was anywhere else to go. The first sign appeared during a routine client meeting with Luxe Cosmetics. Sarah was midway through presenting their holiday campaign when Gloria Chen, the CEO, slid a familiar-looking document across the conference table. "Care to explain this?" she asked, her perfectly manicured nail tapping against the paper. Sarah's blood ran cold. It was her confidential strategy blueprint for Luxe's upcoming skincare line launch, except it wasn't. The document bore striking similarities to her work, but key elements had been twisted, repurposed for their biggest competitor, Radiance Beauty. The typography, the market analysis framework, even the unique demographic targeting approach she'd developed, all there, just slightly modified. "I trusted you, Sarah," Gloria said, disappointment evident in her voice. "We've worked together for 3 years. How did our strategy end up in our competitors' hands?" Back in her office, Sarah's hands trembled as she reviewed every file access log, every email thread. The leak had to have come from somewhere, but her team's security protocols were ironclad. As she scrolled through her sent items, a pattern emerged. Subtle formatting changes in documents she distinctly remembered perfecting, slight alterations in presentation decks she personally finalized. That evening, James was late again. "Client dinner," his text read, followed by a string of apologetic emojis. Sarah tried calling Rachel for their usual Wednesday wine night debrief, but it went straight to voicemail. Opening Instagram, she noticed Rachel's latest story, a check-in at Marlowe, the new high-end restaurant downtown, the same place James had mentioned his client dinner was supposed to be. She closed the app, telling herself she was being paranoid, but the coincidences kept piling up. During a team brainstorming session, her junior associate mentioned seeing their newest campaign concept in a rival agency's pitch deck. At an industry networking event, competitors seemed to know details about Sterling and Hayes' upcoming pitches that hadn't left her office. The weekly friend group dinner became an exercise in careful observation. Rachel's phone buzzed constantly, and she'd excuse herself to take calls, returning with slightly smudged lipstick and flushed cheeks. James's jokes felt forced, his hand on Sarah's waist more performative than affectionate. Their friends exchanged quick glances when they thought she wasn't looking, conversations stuttering whenever she joined them. One night, Sarah stayed late at the office, methodically checking her files. A notification popped up. Someone was accessing her presentation folders using her credentials, but she was the only one in the building. The system showed the login coming from James's firm 3 floors down. She reached for her phone to call him, then stopped. According to his earlier text, he was supposed to be at a business dinner in Cambridge. The perfect life she'd built was developing hairline fractures, spreading like cracks in a mirror. Each morning revealed new inconsistencies, fresh betrayals lurking beneath the surface of her carefully curated world. Sarah had built her career on reading between the lines, on spotting patterns others missed. Now those same skills were showing her things she wasn't sure she was ready to see. Sarah's new office space was a converted industrial loft in South Boston, all exposed brick and steel beams. Instead of mahogany furniture and crystal awards, the walls displayed complex flowcharts and digital tracking systems. Her first hire wasn't a marketing executive, it was Marcus, the ET specialist who had discovered Rachel and James's betrayal. Transparently yours, read the minimalist sign above her desk. The name wasn't just a company title, it was a declaration of war. Her first client came through Diana's connections, a whistleblower platform struggling with public trust. Sarah's pitch wasn't about flashy campaigns or viral potential. Instead, she laid out a strategy that turned their greatest weakness, fear of corporate retaliation, into their strongest selling point. Every person who's been betrayed by their company is a potential ally, she explained to their board. We're not selling protection, we're selling redemption. The campaign doubled their user base in 3 months. Behind the scenes, Sarah was building something far more intricate. Each new client brought connections. Each connection offered insights into the corporate world's darker corners. She hired former fraud investigators as market researchers, their real task being to document every instance of stolen intellectual property in Boston's marketing scene. Rachel's fingerprints were everywhere. Sarah tracked the pattern. Companies that hired Rachel's PR services mysteriously gained access to their competitors' strategies. James's investment firm always seemed to know which marketing campaigns would succeed before they launched. Sarah's own agency operated differently. Every client meeting was recorded with consent. All strategy documents were watermarked and digitally tracked. She developed a proprietary system that could trace information leaks back to their sources, officially for client protection. But she had other plans for this technology. Her new reputation grew quietly but steadily. Companies seeking ethical marketing solutions found their way to her door. She never mentioned Rachel or James, but she kept meticulous records of every project they'd stolen, every strategy they'd copied. One evening, as Sarah reviewed security footage from her office cameras, another new standard practice, she noticed Rachel lurking in her building's lobby. The old Sarah would have felt panic. The new Sarah smiled, knowing her office's visitor log would show Rachel's failed attempt to sweet-talk her way past security. Her phone buzzed with a text from Diana. Your Q3 numbers are impressive. Ready for phase 2. Sarah looked at her wall of evidence, each thread connecting to either Rachel or James. Their betrayal had taught her patience. While they built their success on quick wins and stolen ideas, she was constructing something far more durable, a case that would be impossible to defend against. Project Phoenix status update, she typed into her encrypted database. Target R showing first signs of curiosity. Target J's firm recently lost 3 clients to ethical concerns, proceeding as planned. In her new world, revenge wasn't served cold, it was served with documented receipts and time-stamped evidence.